This is CBC Vancouver News.
It was like a totally normal day. He'd gone after school to hang out with some of his friends. His mom was going to pick him up.
A normal day turned tragic. The Abbotsford teen killed in a stabbing on a Surrey bus. And
there's a small number of people that are creating a disproportionate amount of chaos in communities.
Targeting repeat offenders, the province's plan to crack down and offer help to those who need it. Plus,
the damage has been done, and it's irreparable. There's nothing that they could do to give back her life.
Conviction quashed. She went to prison for the death of a toddler in her care. Now BC's highest court rules there's been a miscarriage of justice. Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. A disturbing attack on public transit on the Lower Mainland has left a teenager dead. We first told you about the incident last night. It happened on a bus in Surrey near King George Station. Our Liam Britton spoke with the victim's family this afternoon. So, Liam, what do we know about who he was?
Well, Leanne, his name was Ethan Bestflag. He was 17. Oldest of 5 siblings. His family says he was a hardworking kid, good student, didn't get into trouble. He loved his family, and like a lot of kids that age, he loved video games too. But now he's dead after being stabbed on that bus in Surrey. And his aunt says his family is shattered.
This is tragic. This is a kid just going home from school, or hanging out at some friend's house and being basically slaughtered.
Well, like his aunt mentioned, he was out visiting friends that night, and his mom was going to pick him up at King George Station. And his mom was there to meet him, and on the way, he texted mom, said he was being threatened and that he was scared. That was the last message that she ever got from her son. This all happened around 9:30 last night at the intersection of King George Boulevard and 100th Avenue, right by the King George SkyTrain station. He was on the 503 bus. Paramedics attended to Ethan and took him to the hospital, but he died of his wounds. Right now, police believe the incident arose from an altercation between Ethan and another person. There were lots of witnesses around, but police were tight-lipped about the lead-up to the tragedy. So far, no arrests have been made and no suspects identified publicly.
Liam, such unfortunate news, very tragic. It's also the second stabbing within 2 weeks on public transit. What are police saying about that part?
Well, yeah, Leanne, you might remember we reported on another stabbing on a Surrey bus. That was April 1st on Fraser Highway. The victim's throat was slashed, but fortunately, he's expected to recover. The suspect is facing terrorism charges in that matter. We've had no information that stabbings are related, but both incidents, police say, are targeted and isolated. Understandably, though, it's creating a lot of fear, and Mounties say they're responding.
We will be upping our patrols through a joint project alongside with Transit Police, given the recent violent incidents. While overall crime is down so far this year in Surrey by 14%, we do closely monitor the crime trends by location and strategically deploy our resources in identified areas.
So the corporal didn't offer details about what those additional patrols will look like. She says they already monitor safety with Transit Police, but this is a new effort in light of the recent spate of incidents. Leanne?
All right, thank you, Liam. Liam Britton reporting for us tonight. The provincial government says it is creating 12 hubs across BC to deal with repeat offenders. The hubs are teams of police, dedicated prosecutors, and probation officers who will focus on targeted investigations and enforcement. As Mira Baines reports, Premier David Eby was heckled by protesters as he arrived in Nanaimo.
Fed up and frustrated, protesters gathered at the government's announcement. Nanaimo has been struggling, like many BC cities, to deal with crime.
It's been erupting like a huge volcano here. We've had our encampments, we've had our tent cities, we've had broken windows thrown at businesses.
Premier David Eby met with Nanaimo's mayor and city council, announcing 2 key measures to address violent repeat offending.
There's a small number of people that are creating a disproportionate amount of chaos in communities.
One measure is setting up a dozen hubs made up of police, probation officers, and prosecutors soon, the first of which will come to Nanaimo next month. The city's mayor says it's a short-term solution, but a good start.
Let's be candid about this. We face in our streets across this province the results of 30 and 40 years of failed social and health policy.
The Repeat Violent Offending Intervention Initiative hubs will be set up across BC. They'll be located in Nanaimo, Victoria, Vancouver, Surrey, New Westminster, Abbotsford, Kamloops, Kelowna, Cranbrook, Prince George, Williams Lake, and Terrace. The second piece of the government's plan is more money for policing, $16 million over 3 years.
With this additional funding, police across the province will have more resources for targeted investigations of repeat violent offenders and incidents linked to weapons offenses and stranger attacks.
The province is still waiting for federal changes to legislation for tougher bail rules after receiving a commitment last month. This community advocate says she's disappointed the province focused on enforcement and not provided more supports.
Yesterday, our outreach team saw 92 new unique faces in our community, and I think those challenges are just going to continue to get worse. I think our enforcement measures in this community has now just created this environment of desperation.
After the announcement, Eby spoke with protesters who had heckled him earlier. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
One person has died and 3 others are hurt after an avalanche in northern BC yesterday. A group of heli-skiers got hit by a slide just after 3:30 in the afternoon. The Last Frontier heli-skiing team tells CBC News 5 people were caught near the Belle 2 Lodge, around 150 kilometers north of Stewart. Paramedics airlifted out 1 person with serious injuries to hospital. The BC Search and Rescue Association says this shows the avalanche risk is still out there, and even more so now going into the spring season. The BC Court of Appeal has quashed the conviction of a woman jailed for the death of a child who was in her care. Tammy Bouvette was originally charged with a second-degree murder after the toddler died in 2011. Her case was reviewed after investigation by CBC's The Fifth Estate, which revealed the Crown failed to disclose crucial evidence to her defense lawyer. The Fifth Estate's Mark Kelly has more on what the court has called an abuse of process.
That was Tammy Bouvette in 2012, charged with second-degree murder after the child she was babysitting, 19-month-old Ayanna Teeple, drowned in a bathtub.
I love that little girl like my own. It's a horrible thing happened, and then I get charged with something like this. There's no justice.
The RCMP saw no foul play, but the case changed after the medical examiner, Dr. Evan Matches, said he saw extensive bruising on the girl, which he determined was typical of abused children. Bouvette pleaded guilty to criminal negligence and told the Fifth Estate that was to avoid a possible life sentence for murder. What her defense didn't know was a panel of experts had determined Dr. Match's conclusions about what happened in this house were unreliable, and that was never disclosed to Bouvette's lawyers. That expert report has since been set aside by the courts, and today's decision makes clear the court was not evaluating the work of Dr. Matches. Still, Bouvette's lawyers argued she would not have pleaded guilty if she had known about the undisclosed report. Now the BC Court of Appeal is calling her conviction a miscarriage of justice. The BC Prosecution Service admits mistakes were made and lessons have been learned, but stops short of an apology.
Unfortunately, from Tammy's perspective, it doesn't really matter what the BC Prosecution Service does moving forward because the damage has been done and it's irreparable. There's nothing that they could do to give back her life.
In 2020, the Fifth Estate unearthed that expert report supporting Bouvette's innocence. But by then, Bouvette was homeless, struggling with drug addiction, her 4 children taken from her custody.
I got put in a category which I'm not.
What category is that?
I am not a baby killer.
That was Mark Kelly reporting. Tammy Bouvette's lawyers are still trying to track her down to tell her today's news. They say Bouvette has been living in and out of shelters in New Westminster. They will be advising her to take this ruling and to sue the BC government for compensation. It's been nearly a month since public transit in the Eastern Fraser Valley ground to a halt. Bus drivers continue to strike for better working conditions and pay. But the union representing them says negotiations are non-existent. And as Joel Ballard reports, it's now calling on BC Transit and the province to take action.
Why are we valued so much less?
For the past 12 years, Elizabeth Rue has worked as a bus driver in the Fraser Valley. During that time, she has never earned a single dollar in pension.
I never realized I was being treated that badly until we started getting the numbers, and it shocked me. to find out we were being so underpaid and so undervalued.
Rue is among the more than 200 bus drivers who walked off the job 24 days ago, fighting for wage parity with drivers from nearby regions, work-life balance, and pensions.
We want to go back to work. We want to be serving the communities. We want to be driving the buses, but we want to be treated fairly. What do we want?
In Chilliwack, Rue and fellow transit workers gathered, demanding a fair contract from their employer, First Transit, an American for-profit company contracted by BC Transit. But the union's lead negotiator says there's been radio silence from the employer since the start of the strike.
First Transit is not going to move on their wage and pension on our proposals on that, and so as such, they're not meeting with us.
They don't like us!
Workers were joined at the rally by the BC Federation of Labor.
Anytime you have a foreign corporation that comes in, and when they're so far removed from the community, how would they understand all the issues that are here in our communities, the issues that the workers have?
With no movement on negotiations, there's a call for BC Transit and the province to step up, to apply pressure on First Transit and ensure that sustainable public transit is available to all BC communities.
BC Transit has to do their job and make sure that the transit service is running, and if they're not doing that, then the minister responsible for BC Transit should be doing something to make sure that they are.
But a statement from First Transit tells a different story, saying its lines of communication remain open and it's willing to restart constructive negotiations. Meanwhile, BC Transit says the labor dispute is between the workers and their employer.
Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
For these drivers, it's been 24 hard days of striking, but they say they'll keep going until a fair deal is secured. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Chilliwack.
BC's Minister of Labour, Harry Bains, wasn't available for an interview today, but in a statement, he says he's reached out to both parties and again offered mediation from the Labour Relations Board, and that he encourages both sides to get back to the bargaining table quickly to work out a deal. Well, it is official. The BC Liberals have become BC United. Here's a look at their new logo. The party made the switch after 80% of its members voted in favor of the name change. It was a promise that leader Kevin Falcon made during his leadership campaign. The hope is that the name will better reflect the party.
About coming together with a common purpose. And in our case, that common purpose is making sure that we're actually genuinely improving people's lives, doing the work on the ground, delivering on results, not rhetoric, on outcomes, not partisanship. I think that's what the public really wants to see, and that's what we're all about, is coming together across all kinds of backgrounds and perspectives to really deliver for British Columbians.
For the priorities of the BC Liberals, their priority right now is to change their name. I definitely understand why. I don't think it will change their legacy in this province. For us, we're focused on housing, public safety, making sure that healthcare is there for people, and that we have a strong economy that works for everybody.
BC United members hope this move will give voters enough time to become familiar with the new name before next year's scheduled provincial election. And some sad news in the BC sports world. Family and friends are devastated after a former professional hockey player from Richmond died on the ice this week. 38-year-old Raymond Sawada collapsed on the bench at the Richmond Ice Centre on Monday night during a recreation game and couldn't be saved. The president of the Richmond Sockeyes, Doug Patterson, says Sawada always gave back to the hockey community. He played 8 years in the American Hockey League and 11 games with the NHL's Dallas Stars. Sawada had worked as a firefighter in Burnaby since 2017. He leaves behind a wife and 2 young daughters. BC's farming industry has taken quite a blow recently, from rising costs to extreme weather conditions. But it may be facing something bigger, a labor shortage, with fewer people wanting to enter the field. Saurabh Sandhu has more.
Bill Zaltzman has been farming for over 4 decades. His father was also a farmer. But his 2 children are not going to follow in his footsteps.
I was in a runaway truck, going down the highway thinking everything was going great, to find out that somehow this dream has to take a different turn.
He had to find other options, and that was scaling back his operations.
So we made a plan to start to downsize, start to diversify away from what we were doing, and sold 1 small farm,
It's something that industry observers have also noticed. According to a recent report by Royal Bank of Canada, 66% of farmers do not have a succession plan. It also says by 2033, a shortfall of 24,000 general farm, nursery, and greenhouse workers is expected to emerge.
The key question we attempt to answer in this with our partners is how are you going to stem this labor and skills shortage that we're going to be facing, and how can we proceed forward?
The report also says by 2033, 40% of Canadian farm operators will retire. Experts believe this could lead to a severe problem as young Canadians are not taking up farming. And there are several reasons for their lack of interest.
One, of course, is land affordability. It's just so expensive just to acquire the land.
Many believe climate extremities are also a growing cause of concern for the farming community. One solution is to invest in education for next generation of farmers and in automation.
Folks don't have a lot of capital to invest in that kind of infrastructure themselves. They're really looking to government for leadership and support to finance that kind of infrastructure.
But to address the short-term lack of skilled labor, the industry will need to look outside the country. The report pushing for 30,000 immigrants to be accepted over the next decade that will set up their own farms or take over existing ones. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Delta.
It may be necessary for interest rates to stay elevated.
The cost of borrowing money in this country is holding steady, but it's still at a 15-year high. More on that story after the break. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. There's been some controversy over a recent tourism push for Regina. But ever wonder how the capital of Saskatchewan got its name? Alexander Kwan explains how it's evolved over the years.
Regina. It's known for its freezing cold, Wascana Park, and being the capital of Saskatchewan. But over the past week, this city has drawn attention for the wrong reasons. That's because of how residents of this city pronounce its name, Regina. Now, that wasn't always the case, so how did we get here? Regina! So before there was ever a Regina, this place was known in Cree as Oskana Kaasastega, or the place where the bones are piled. When First Nations people were pushed onto reserves and settlers arrived, that name was still used. But in 1882, Princess Louise, the wife of the local Governor General, suggested renaming the town in honor of her mother, Queen Victoria.
So as most people know, Regina is of Latin origin and it means queen. In classical Latin, the word was originally pronounced as Regina.
Languages change over time according to experts, adapting and transforming. So while the spelling of Regina has remained the same, the pronunciation has continued to change. Regina, the Latin pronunciation, is rarely used anymore. Instead, as a result of a process called lenition, the pronunciation was modified to Regina, which you can still find in languages such as French. The word would change even further from its origins as vowels started shifting during the 1400s in England. That takes us to the founding of this city, Regina.
1882, Regina was the proper term used in England and was the official title of Queen Victoria. And of course, you don't want to offend Her Majesty by incorrectly pronouncing her title. And that's how we ended up with Regina. I would still say that Regina is pronounced as Regina. That's how the majority of people from the city say it. And that is the current pronunciation. Now, the question is this going to end up shifting at some point? Who knows?
Experts say there is no right way to pronounce a word. It all depends on the local dialect.
It's very similar to tomato, potato saying. Regina versus Regina.
Could city councilors introduce a motion that would help Regina avoid this problem in the future by symbolically changing how we pronounce the word? Yes, but they probably won't. So, in Saskatchewan, at least for now, Regina is here to stay. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
Welcome back. The Bank of Canada is holding its key lending rate at 4.5%. After raising rates 8 times, the central bank has paused as it assesses the impact of higher rates on the economy. Nisha Patel has more on how Canadians are coping.
Eddie Ko is shopping for a new mortgage.
They are a bit more than what I expected.
Since he bought his condo 5 years ago, interest rates have soared. Now he's up for renewal and expects his monthly payments could go up as much as $800 a month.
We saw the rates went up and up and up, and our hearts were just like, well, having heart attacks at that time.
He's thinking about driving Uber to earn some extra cash and pinching his pennies to pay the bills.
We are cutting costs from our food, cutting costs on our entertainment expenses. Anything that we can see, we can save.
But less spending is just what the Bank of Canada ordered to slow the economy and cool inflation. On that front, the central bank says it's winning. From a peak of 8.1% last June, inflation has now fallen to 5.2%. The bank forecasts a drop to 3% by this summer.
Our message is plan for inflation to come back down, plan for price stability.
Still, the bank expects it will take until the end of next year to get back to the target of 2% and urge Canadians to be prepared.
It may be necessary for interest rates to stay elevated for longer to get that job done.
Despite those higher interest rates, the economy has proven resilient, and experts say the prospect of interest rate cuts this year is unlikely.
They are not going to be in a hurry to cut them when inflation is still above its target.
Ko plans to lock into a fixed-rate mortgage, so at least he knows the payments won't go any higher.
It's just living day by day, paycheck by paycheck. There's no way for us to save any more extra money.
A tough decision many Canadians will face in the months ahead. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
And this was sunset over Victoria's Harbour from the Swans Hotel on an absolutely gorgeous night. A couple of high clouds there, almost looking summer-like, but it's not going to feel like that quite yet. Temperature is seasonal. Kuljeet will have your full forecast coming up after the break. Stay with us.
It was the largest ever non-nuclear explosion during peacetime. 50 years later, history repeats itself, a reenactment of the explosion to mark the anniversary of BC's Big Bang.
Looks like a baby compared to the original.
Prior to the explosion, Ripple Rock was a treacherous shipping hazard. The Twin Peak rock sat just below the surface in the middle of Seymour Narrows. Over the years, Ripple Rock claimed more than 100 lives. So in 1953, the federal government decided it had to go.
So all the people who I know were here 50 years ago.
Bill Pellegrim was one of the miners saddled with the task of preparing Ripple Rock for blastoff.
It was quite an experience, you know.
For more than a year, Pellegrin spent his days drilling shafts to hold 1,400 tons of explosives. Harry Nuttall filmed the event. Nuttall was part of a team of camera operators focused on capturing the explosion for the CBC's first live coast-to-coast broadcast.
It was quite impressive and quite quiet by comparison to the tests the day before. Just all that water on top of it, boom, boom, up and down.
Like this event, the original blast drew curious onlookers. But back in 1958, there was fear the explosion would generate a tidal wave and damage Campbell River.
I had a baby and I had him in a basket and I had food and bottles and everything. I had the car parked at the door and I was ready to take to the hills.
Folks here now chuckle at those worries, but they still marvel at the success of the blast. Ripple Rock's pinnacle was reduced by more than 22 meters. The explosion is now officially designated a National Historic Event. Melanie Nagy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
The Surrey Board of Trade's Top 25 Under 25 Awards returns on May 3rd. Celebrate Surrey's role models and get your tickets today at businessinsurrey.com. And join CBC Vancouver's Gloria Makarenko at the annual Because Mothers Matter Awards on May 10th. Celebrate women's extraordinary achievements at this year's event. Learn more at mothersmattercentre.ca.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
And we've got Kuljeet Kaila in for Johanna Wagstaff. So Kuljeet, did you get a chance to enjoy that beautiful day that we have? So much sunshine, but cool.
You know, I was telling everybody in the newsroom, all of our coworkers, make sure you get outside, even for just a few minutes. It's a little bit cold and breezy earlier today, but a beautiful day. Did you get outside?
I did a little bit. I mean, it was worth it. Chilly, but definitely gorgeous. Loved it.
So that breeze is going to continue. We do have breeze along the coast for Vancouver and for Juan de Fuca Strait. So if you're in Greater Victoria, the breeze will continue overnight and into tomorrow morning. Today's high was 9 degrees, the average for this time of year 12. So it is a little bit cooler than usual. Low sitting at 2, average for this time of year is closer to 5. We will see maybe a little bit of rain tomorrow morning, 60% chance of rain for about an hour or so, and then some wind by the water. Like I said, it'll be relatively light throughout the day, so not as cold as what we saw today. Across the province, wet conditions along the coast for Prince Rupert and Port Hardy, sitting around 7 degrees. Prince George and Williams Lake, cloudy at around 7 degrees. The sunshine that we'll see tomorrow will be for Kelowna and for Cranbrook. A little bit of snow there as well. Light snow for Cranbrook tomorrow at 10 degrees. Here's our long-term forecast. Tomorrow, a little bit of a sprinkle in the morning. That sun will come back for Friday with a little bit of cloud, but then we've got rain for Saturday and Sunday. We're going to see about 20 millimeters of rain for both Saturday and Sunday each. Light rain for Monday to continue off into the next week, but then we will see more sunshine mid next week and temperatures around 9 and 10 degrees. So it'll be relatively nice spring-like weather again into next week. Leanne?
All right, until then, some rain possibly for the weekend.
Yes.
Okay, so much for that. All right, thank you so much, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
It looks like Friday is a great day to play hooky there. All right. Don't take my advice. Maybe once in a while. It's not so bad, hey? All right, that's it for us this Wednesday night. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, go to our website, cbc.ca/BC. I'll see you back here over the weekend. Have a good one.